Labour's strategy since Keir Starmer was elected leader has been to not commit to, well, anything. They see policy pledges as vulnerabilities, and so they avoid them. But with a general election underway, they still aren't moving away from that plan and that position. Asked about investment in our sewage system on BBC Question Time, Labour's Bridget Phillipson said this.
We're all going to be on the hook for billions and billions of pounds to increase our infrastructure. Who's going to pay for it?
Well, the water company should have been investing over the decades.
But we are where we are now, so who's going to pay for it?
The water companies need to be held responsible, and water company bosses need to be held responsible for their total failure to invest since privatisation in the infrastructure. So should the water companies find the billions of pounds? Is that what you're saying? Well, they should have been doing this already. That was the point of privatising.
I'm just trying to work out. I'm not disputing that, but you want to be in power in a couple of months.
Absolutely.
You've got water companies that are going to have to find billions of pounds for infrastructure. You've got Thames Water who's in debt and their investors saying, well, we're not going to pay. And the government's looking at possible plans to renationalise. Should you be in power, where's the money going to come from?
Well, the water companies need to crack on and make some progress on this.
They need to crack on and make some progress. That wasn't really a plan, was it? I mean, she had a critique. She was saying they should have been investing this money for decades, but they want to be in government in about 6 weeks' time. So you need a little bit more than that to say, well, they should have been doing it over the last 20 years. Yeah, but you're now going to be in power. What are you going to do about it? And Bridget Phillipson is Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, so that should be, where she really knows her stuff. But on funding for universities, she also struggled with an answer.
How would you help universities get more money?
So from opposition, again, to be totally upfront about this, from opposition, it is genuinely very difficult to grapple.
So you haven't got an answer again. You haven't got an answer again. You're adopting an answer.
Hang on, let Bridget speak.
Look, it is the modelling around this is really complicated in terms of the outcomes. I am determined that we can deliver a more progressive system without any more spending or borrowing, but from the system that we have at the moment for students.
But as Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget, you must have thought about
out there. You can go and look at where that absolutely can be delivered.
You're Shadow Education Secretary. Yeah. If you win the election, I'm assuming you want to be Education Secretary, would you raise tuition fees?
That is a really, really unpalatable choice. I do not want to have to do that. I absolutely don't, because when I speak to students across the country, what they tell...
No, not going to rule it out, clearly.
The modelling is difficult. That would be a difficult choice. You are going to have to make your mind up soon. Or will they? I was reading, I think it was on Politico, actually. They're saying Labour advisors have been speaking to Joe Biden advisors, and they were said, no, don't commit to anything. Every commitment you make is just something that you can be attacked on. I suppose it's don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Everyone hates the Conservative Party. Why would you go out and create a load of talking points where they can say, this will cost this much, this will cost this much, they're going to increase your taxes? It's a small C Conservative strategy where you're sort of saying, let's have as few areas where we can be attacked as possible. But it does end up making them sound a bit shifty, like they haven't really thought about this, because those weren't clear answers to two pretty big issues. Our sewage systems, our education system, what are you going to do? Well, it's fairly complicated. Who's to say? What about the rule of law? So one of the reasons they've been saying we can't say is because there's not enough money, we can't really commit because this is too difficult. Well, the rule of law, sort of committing to it, that shouldn't really cost anything to deliver. So could Phillipson manage anything more concrete on that?
The Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, says Labour's position is that the ICC Chief Prosecutor's decision to apply for arrest warrants is an independent matter for the court. So you're just wait and see what happens. And then presumably, as I say, if this arrest warrant goes ahead and Labour were in power, Labour would arrest the Israeli Prime Minister. So that's the natural sequence of events.
So it's an independent matter for the Chief Prosecutor who was going through that process. It is a formal process that should be gone through. The immediate priority does have to be getting to a ceasefire, getting the release of hostages, getting more aid into Gaza, and alongside that moving towards a two-state solution, a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable Palestinian state.
The question is, should we welcome the intervention from the ICC?
Well, I think the immediate priority has to be getting to a ceasefire.
No, you said that.
Yeah,
let's answer the question. So should we welcome the intervention from the International Criminal Court?
I think the rule of law matters. I think the international rule of law matters. It used to matter to the Conservative Party as well. It matters to me. There is a process to go through. It's absolutely right that process happens. Okay. If that's what the Chief Prosecutor has determined, But this is only the first step. There has been no
I
conclusion
get
reached
that.
on this topic.
But given that Labour is taking a different position, I'm keen to explore it because, as I say, we're in a general election. You may be in power come second week of July. If this goes ahead through the ICC, and you say you support the ICC and the rule of law, you would be in the position as a government where you would have to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu should he come to this country. Would you do it?
So what you're setting out is a hypothetical scenario where you're a long way from that process.
It's a hypothetical scenario, but it's quite likely to happen. And if you want to be elected to government, we are going to put hypothetical scenarios to you, right? Because the whole point of an election is you want to know what that group of people, what kind of decisions they would make in different scenarios, right? That's normally how a job interview works, actually. They don't just ask you about stuff that's happened in the past. They say, if this were to happen in the future, what would you decide? And it's a very simple question, right? It's not a difficult question, actually. Would you follow through on an arrest warrant by the ICC? And if we're signed up to the Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court, it's not a choice. We are legally obligated to arrest anyone who has an arrest warrant out for them if they enter the UK. So that shouldn't have been a difficult question to answer, but it was still just complete blather. Important as well on this one, because you saw in those sort of first two answers that we showed you, the strategy from the Labour Party is to say, look, this is really difficult because the Tories have screwed it up over the past 14 years. We don't really know what to do about tuition fees, but what we can say is the Tories have screwed it up. We don't know what to do about, the sewage system, but what we can say is the Tories and the energy companies or the water companies have screwed it up. When it comes to the International Criminal Court, the Tories haven't screwed that up, right? There's no reason why Labour get into power and say, we've inherited such a difficult situation that we can't carry out the obligations imposed on us by the Rome Statute and the International Criminal Court. You literally have absolute agency on that question. Your hands are not tied. There is no bad past government that has binded your hands so that you can't arrest someone who has an arrest warrant out for them. Obviously, Netanyahu doesn't yet, but if he were to, you would be able to arrest that guy. So I don't know why they can't commit to that. So 6 weeks out from an election, Labour does seem to be struggling with concrete answers on pretty much every question. And one audience member had enough.
I've come to this program, really want to listen to what Labour Party is going to say. I used to vote for Labour Party. And you've not answered any question at all. See, you've not answered. Look. I know my local MP, Taiwo Watebe. I've spoken, I know her very well. But I just want to hear what the Labour Party wants to say about a lot of stuff. Okay. But tonight you've said nothing. You've just given us the vague answers. Just answer the question and just convince me to vote for you.
Okay.
I want you. You know what I mean? Convince me. Tell me how.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm absolutely doing my level best to answer as directly as I can. I think I tried to be really, try to answer as honestly and straightforwardly.
So please make me vote for you.
I hope I've addressed the question around the International Criminal Court. If you want me to set out what Labour would do in education, for example, happy to do that. Breakfast clubs, skills,
can I just say something?
Much more besides mental health support in our schools, more teachers in our classrooms. That we've got an awful lot to say.
I understand that. In 2 months' time, you could be the education secretary.
Yep.
And if I were you, my advice would be, you can actually, it's a political choice. Mm-hmm. You can actually take the education budget and make it an investment instead of, making an expenditure. Why don't you do that? If you make it an investment, as they do in Singapore, in Norway, in Finland, take it away, make it an investment, and that reduces the budget deficit. Mm-hmm. That helps everyone. Invest in education, invest in special education needs, invest in university, do something, Labour Party. Please do.
Okay.
That intervention from that audience member who put it very well, got a big round of applause, right? We're in the middle of a general election now. The Shadow Education Secretary had not won over the question time audience.
Well, we're not in the middle. They haven't dissolved Parliament. I don't think it's dissolved till the 30th. So we're very much in the foothills, Michael, fortunately.
I accept your correction.
Well, we are, Novara is going to be here to cover all the twists and turns of this general election, Michael. So people should know that we've got lots of treats planned in the weeks ahead. In terms of that performance from Ms. Phillipson on BBC Question Time. Look, the whole thing was just absurd. And the whole point of a two-party system has many downsides, right? Has many downsides. It can be not very democratic. You can have a massive incongruence between the percentage of votes a party gets and the number of MPs it gets, for better or worse. You can have the rise of what was called by one lord in the 1980s, an elective dictatorship without checks and balances, all these things, blah, blah. The one thing it does is it means that you have two alternatives. They bring forward their policy proposals and their prospectus for power, and the electorate has a choice. And then because of the way that first past the post works, they have a majority to deliver on those promises. And Labour are just doing the complete opposite of what they're meant to do. That is the conventional defence of first past the post and two-party system. And Labour aren't doing that. And so particularly on things like water nationalisation, Michael, look, they don't want to bring water into public ownership. Why? It goes back to that point I said earlier on. They don't want to do anything. It's too hard, right? And I think this is something, again, as you get older, you start to work this out. People at the top of an organisation which is on its arse in their mid-50s, they don't want to fix it. They want to be around just long enough so they can, earn their money, leave, retire, get their pension. Fine. They don't want to fix it. And I think it's the same very much with many elected politicians. It's very rare for a politician to say, I have a vision for this particular thing. I really want to get to the bottom of it and I want to turn it around. It certainly isn't the case with regards to Labour and many things. Utilities here being the example. If you look at water, for instance, Thames Water is probably going to need to be nationalised. They've said, to be fair, they would nationalise that. That's going to require an extraordinary intervention. You have at the same time as that large numbers of former Labour MPs, including Melanie On, former advisors, going to work really in the communications, corporate affairs and lobbying industries, representing clients who are, guess what, water companies. So there is this very common, sadly, relationship between lobbying private interests, privatised utilities and former politicians, very much on the Labour side. Of course, another one was Angela Smith, one of the Change UK people. She got involved in Portsmouth Water, I believe. She's big into privatised water, even though it hasn't really delivered for people. And what I found particularly funny there, Michael, with Bridget Phillipson, was she's saying, well, the government should have done something about it. Water was privatised in the early 1990s. Labour were the government from 1997 to 2010. And the water companies weren't investing then. They were taking out these huge dividends. They were taking huge loans and borrowing those loans against the companies while paying the dividends. So you have, I think, something like 60, 70 billion pounds worth of debt's been placed on these water companies. 70, 80 billion pounds worth of dividends have been taken out. It's the biggest organised heist imaginable in this country. And Labour played a part. Right? Okay, they weren't there when it all started to collapse, which is what's happening right now. The Tories are, but there was two-party consensus for privatised water. They were in charge for 13 years while this was all happening. The point is that the chickens are coming home to roost now, and of course you have to paint that as a distinctly Tory problem. So no, they don't want to fix water because it's going to cost a hell of a lot of money. It's going to make lots of people really upset. Rail is a bit easier, right? But water, even if you bring it into public ownership, you're still going to have to increase bills because nobody's actually maintained the infrastructure properly for 30 years. An amazing statistic I read recently, Michael, I think it was Thames Water, they've only mapped around 50% of the infrastructure they have. 50%. I think they've mapped about 40%. This is in the Financial Times. So how can they be on top of what needs to be fixed and repaired when they don't even know what they have? It's crazy. There's a great quote, you can only manage what you measure. They're not even measuring things. They don't know where stuff is, right? How can you manage this network of water supply and storage if you literally haven't mapped it? These are Victorian maps, which apparently have just been lost. So it is concerning. And it's concerning, like I say, you're breaking with the convention of going to the electorate with your electoral offer, which is what the Labour Party did in 1945. It's what the Tories did in 2019 with Brexit. They said, we'll get Brexit done. We'll get it done. And they kind of did. But it's not happening here. It's just gesturing. Well, the Tories are bad. We won't make any wholesale changes. I get it. You don't want to do that. But what if you have to, right? What if you have to? There's no point digging a hole if it's in the wrong place, right? Some little tweaks and, we won't allow bonuses to go to executives. And that's what they've said before in the water industry. That's not the problem here. The problem is that over the course of 30 years, about 140 billion pounds was basically transferred from public pockets to private pockets. That's the problem. Stopping some CEO getting a 900k bonus in 2025. Okay, I support it. That's not the solution. But of course, again, look, I've said the inertia thing. There's a secondary point here, which is that anything that Labour put in their 29 manifesto, anything associated with the left of the party, is viewed, not just by the Labour establishment, but actually by much of the media too, as necessarily bad. It has to be bad. Jeremy Corbyn pushed it. But what if that's the solution to this problem? What if public ownership of water, rail, mail is the solution to these problems? Well, I think at least we can begin to have an honest conversation about that after the general election. If Labour get in, they do these little fiddling of cufflinks and, just sort of little brushes here and there, a bit of dusting. You do that, it doesn't work, and then let's have a grown-up conversation about public ownership and public investment.
One thing I think we're learning this week is Labour haven't really been tested yet. And while, there are large parts of the media which, I think feel very warm, essentially, towards Keir Starmer and his front bench, in a general election, they kind of have no choice but to scrutinise Labour. So Labour are going to have to come up over the next 6 weeks. Well, I suppose it's an open question, actually. Do they even have to come up with better questions over the next 6 weeks? Because the Tories are so unpopular. They'll probably win anyway. But I suppose we will see Labour tested in a way that we haven't seen them over the past 5 years. So it will be interesting. And of course, we'll see the Tories tested as well. But they've been taking flack for a very long time as a completely failing government.